Hi guys, it's Steph from IDRIVEACLASSIC, and today I'm back in the Triumph Acclaim. I've seen them at car shows, but I have never driven one. And it's a really interesting car because it's somebody's daily car and it's a super rare car as well. And in fact, this particular model, which is the L, there are only 7 left on the road in Britain today. And of that, we think this is the only blue one. So it's really exciting to take this car out, and really special as well, because when are we going to see another one? So today's video has come out of a bit of a weird conversation where we were talking about what it's like to daily a rare car. So in today's video, I'm going to show you a very honest, well-loved car. It maybe isn't the best example I could have found, but it's certainly the example with the best story. So remember, this is somebody's daily car doing 10,000 miles a year, so be kind. So in this video today, we're going to look around the outside of the car, hop inside, take a look inside, and spoiler, it's really blue. And then we're going to take it out for a road test and see what it's like. Now, I've already driven it, and I think you're going to love it just as much as I did.
Today we're looking at this amazing Triumph Acclaim. Now the Acclaim was launched all the way back in 1981 and was not only the last car to ever carry the Triumph name, but was also the first car to come to fruition from the BL and Honda partnership. The idea of a partnership began way back in 1978 when Mark Snowden, the director of product development, decided to make a mid-size car to replace the Triumph Dolomite. The brief was simple. The car needed to compete against, and really well against, market share leaders, but it needed to be produced quickly and cheaply. Now, lots of manufacturers were considered, but BL went to Honda over some of the other European manufacturers simply for protectionist reasons. They felt that Honda was a good choice because they didn't see them as dominating any future ventures. Now, some of the names that you might be wondering were considered included AMC, BMW, Chrysler, Fiat, Ford, Mazda, Nissan and Volvo. And in fact, Chrysler was actually the first choice. Mike Edwards then took this further and reached out to the Honda team to get a bit of a feel for what the partnership could look like, not only now but in the future as well, because they didn't see this being a bit of a one-off. And in October 1978, formal talks began and Project Bounty kicked off. The idea was that BL would create a modified version of the Honda Ballade, and then they would badge it as a Triumph. And so from 1981 through to 1984, the Triumph Acclaim was available to customers. And it's worth noting as well that to avoid cannibalisation and detracting from the Acclaim, the Honda Ballade was never formally marketed within the UK. Now, interestingly, despite being really derided by Triumph fans as not a real Triumph, much in the same way that some people say the new MGs aren't really an MG, it was actually the most reliable car in the BL lineup. And it sold really well too. It was the second best-selling Triumph of all time, despite the fact it was made for such a short period of time. And the bestseller, for your records, was actually the Herald 1200. And it's incredible, really, because it was available for such a small time and so derided by real Triumph fans, and yet it did so well. Now, the car, to an extent, was a bit of a game of two halves because the engines were made in Japan and the cars were made and built at Cowley. In fact, the car overall used, I think, 80% British source parts. And for those that sneer and don't see it as a British car, it wasn't just a high proportion of parts which made it British. It, in fact, kept 2,000 people employed in Cowley and various other jobs within the component industry as well. The engine, interestingly, would have been made in the UK, but the volumes weren't high enough to justify it. And with it being an engine known for being so reliable, it kind of does make you wonder why they didn't look at it and say, let's park up the A series, don't worry about the K series, and we'll go to Honda, because they were really getting it right with their engines. Now, despite the Triumph diehards being very hard to please, the usually negative about BL press actually quite like this car, and what Car magazine actually said at the time, it displayed all the qualities needed for success in the market sector. And when you think about cars like the Allegro that were so slagged off, the Marina that was so slagged off in the 70s, this was a really big triumph for, no pun intended, for BL. Now, despite all this, and despite what a good car it was, lingering criticism around the Japanese influence and involvement really hung over this car, which is crazy to think about because if you think about the market today, Japanese cars are seen as being really reliable, and this wouldn't have been much of an issue. However, and this is really actually quite awkward to talk about, some of the criticism really was just misplaced patriotism and a sense of people being really protective of home brands, which held people back from being complimentary when the car actually really deserved it. Now, overall, just over 130,000 of these cars were made, and whilst it was reliable, it didn't actually offer a massive buyer's choice because you only had one engine, which was, as we'll see under the bonnet, the all-alloy overhead cam 1.3 Honda engine, which was also used in the Honda Civic. And for the transmission, you either got a 5-speed manual, like we're testing today, or a 3-speed Triumph, so basically automatic. Now, although the numbers look small, it did really well in its lifetime, and it was in the top 10 best-selling cars of both 1982 and 1983. The only reason it actually came to an end was because it was replaced by the Rover 200 in 1984. But remember that Rover 200 as well was a Honda and a BL tie-up as well. So all in all, although people may not really remember this car very well, although people might say, don't really remember much of it, it was actually quite a successful car. Now, before we take the car out today, I'm going to have a chat with Anthony, and I'm going to get him to talk to us a little bit about this car because although you've probably spotted it's a little bit rough around the edges, it fascinated me that he is actually using this really rare car as a daily. So let's go and have a chat with Anthony.
Hello, I'm Anthony of the Captain 70s YouTube channel. Steph has been out in my 1983 Triumph Acclaim L today. So I bought this car a couple of years ago now because I was looking for a classic car that would be ideal as daily transport. And I had a few Triumph Dolomites before, and I saw this crop up for sale on eBay, so I jumped on it because I wanted to try out an Acclaim and see how it compared. Turned out so good of a car that I now use it as my daily car. Out of all three of my cars, this is the only one that works. It's kind of an ideal daily driver. I do about 7,000 to 10,000 miles a year, and it's never needed anything replacing on it other than one wheel cylinder and regular servicing. Other than that, it just kind of clocks on, does my commute every day up and down motorways around Glasgow, treks up to see my parents up in the Cairngorms National Park. It's ideal for that sort of thing. 5-speed gearbox, 1.3 litre, 70-ish horsepower, and you can get pretty much most of the bits you'd ever need for it on eBay and other website. Can't fault it, really. It's got everything I need.
Now we've had a look around the outside and we've had a catch up with Anthony, the owner. I wanted to talk you through the dash because if, like me, you've never seen an Acclaim before, you might be wondering what it looks like. It's that weird point in the history of cars where we started getting plastic meets chrome, meets coloured seats, meets all sorts of different decades clashing together. It came out in 1981, as you may know, so it's got some of that 70s styling overhang coming into the 80s with it. Triumph, as a brand, believed that even your most basic car should offer a little bit more than what you got on other basic cars from other brands, hence why their base starting price was a little bit higher than some of the other cars out there. Now, as we come into the centre of the car, it's as you'd probably expect. We've got our heater controls over here, and again, just all your controls there. Coming down into the centre of the dash, we've got the clock, which, I'm going to be honest with you guys, it doesn't actually work. It doesn't tell the right time. And then we've got the stereo as well. The stereo is an aftermarket replacement. Just below that, we've got the ashtray, the cigar lighter, and the choke. And coming in front of us as the driver, we've got the rev counter. We've got a selection of snazzy warning lights, including, I'm going to demo the hazard light for you. It's a bit cool, isn't it? And then over to the right-hand side, we've got the speedo, and as well we've got a trip clock, essential for every journey. Coming down into the centre, we've got the temperature gauge and the fuel gauge as well. So down here, we've got the fog lights, we've got the demist, and then over in front of the driver, we've got to our left the wipers. So we've got intermittent, which is great, and we've got 2 speed wipers as well. We've got low and high. Now over to the right, we've got our indicators, and we've got our lights on the same stalk there as well. And then coming further across, we've got a little coins box. It's quite exciting. And then just down here under my leg, we've got 2 blanking plates. So these two levers that we don't have and we have blanking plates in space for are for the automatic fuel release and for the boot release as well. But being an L, this doesn't have it on. And it's also worth mentioning as well that you'll see, as we've looked around the interior, two fascias that would indicate to you that we've got two speakers in the car. Whereas with this being an L, it did only originally have one speaker, but Anthony has updated this and it now sports two. So that's kind of a bit of a whistle-stop tour really through the interior of the car, and I think now it's high time we talk to you about the gearbox, and I'll walk you through it. So we're going to go into first, then into second, into third, into fourth, coming across up into fifth, and then we lift, and that takes us into reverse. I haven't got my seatbelt on yet, but I thought we would get the car started up. So we turn the key. As you can probably hear, that sounds really, really nice, but you can never get a true appreciation unless we hear it from the back as well. So let's go and have a listen from the back exhaust. Okay, so we're going to first of all start by going through the gears, and I'll be quiet. And that brings us up into fifth gear. We did that relatively quickly, and we hit fifth gear by the point we'd hit 50, and as you can hear by the way that it sounds now, it is a car that really does need that fifth gear. Now, as we'd already discussed in the video, this was the first collaboration between BL and Honda, and it's really weird as well because this is the last Triumph, and in fact, for me, when I think about Triumph, it evokes the image of a sports car, the TR7, the Spitfire. For me, it's those sporty, cool cars, and this is slightly different because for me, this feels a lot more of an everyday car than many of the other Triumphs that I've been out in as a passenger and as a driver. Now, a really interesting thing that I found out when I was talking to Anthony before we took the car out is that this was a car with many air miles attached to it because the engines and the gearboxes came from Japan, hence the collaboration with Honda, and then the body of the car and all the pressed steel was in the UK. The cars were built at Cowley. If you've heard of Cowley before, that is where your Morris cars were built. Now, it's a bit of a weird one because I didn't know what to expect when I took the car out at first, but it's driving just kind of like you would expect a car to drive, and to be honest, the way that it's performing, and it's not the quietest car, it's really not, because you can hear some of the wind noise from the outside, but it's really, really comfortable, and it feels like a car that you could do a fair few miles in. As you can drive, you can probably hear the roads knocking, and yeah, that's not the best, but remember, we're taking out a car which was brought into production in 1981, so for reference, that's the year after the Metro, and unlike some of the other Triumphs, it wasn't really adopted by a younger, sportier crowd. This was for the Dolomite owner, for the existing Triumph owner, who was looking to move into a more sedate age, something that was going to offer them a comfortable run around and be quite reliable. And I think a lot of people tend to think that BL cars are quite unreliable, but this car has proven that's not the case. The one thing I will say for the car though is that a lot of people complain that these did rot. However, I have been told on good authority that these rotted far less than the Rover 200 that came after it. But again, it's just one of those cars, it didn't have a massive following when they started to come up to that point where people chose to either restore or get rid. And so it meant that a lot of these cars, well, they never got restored. They just got, they just ended up at scrapyards. And then of course you've got things like the scrappage scheme that come into place, and that finishes beautiful cars like this off. Because for me, this isn't beautiful in a sense of, you look at that TR7, you look at an E-Type Jag and you think, oh. But it's beautiful in its own way because a little bit like when we talked about the Allegro, I think you would look at this in a car park and you would know that that was the Acclaim. It doesn't remind me massively, apart from it's obviously its Honda sister, it doesn't look like a lot of other cars. It's that front end finish that actually looks quite special. Although this car may not exist in plentiful amounts today, it is actually a really successful bit of that BL-AR history, because the partnership that came out of this from Honda Rover, BL, it actually led on to greater things. So whilst this was the last Triumph and the partnership then went on to be Rover and Honda, it did represent a really good thing, because Honda was so happy with it. They went on to then obviously do the 800, the 200, the R8 that we took out the other week, and so it was a really successful partnership. And in fact, it only came to an end when BMW bought a majority stake in Rover. So what do I think of it overall? I think I'm somebody who dailies a rare car, so it's actually quite interesting to take out somebody else's daily rare car. Would I daily one of these myself? I honestly don't know, and I'll tell you why. Number one, I'm so used to the A series and I'm not that imaginative as a person, as a driver, and for me, always buying into another A series car is a safe bet, whereas this Honda engine is not something that I know and I wouldn't know how to fix. I wouldn't even know where to start with something like that. And it all looks just a bit too complicated for me under that bonnet. It's been an interesting test today to take this out and see what it was like, and I quite like it. I quite like it for what it is. But I'm not sure if I would add it to my own garage. And massive hats off to everybody, because there's a few people actually that are doing some semblance of daily driving, and you know what, massive hats off to them, because I can see why you're doing it. It's an amazing car to drive. It's lovely, it's smooth, it's comfortable. Like, these seats are so comfy, they're more comfy than my sofas at home, and it's just kind of it's one of those 80s cars I think that people will just forget about one day, and that is a massive shame, because this car deserves to be remembered, and I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it for what it is, but weirdly, for one of my test drives, I'm okay about handing the keys back. So I really hope you've enjoyed the video. It's been a strange one to do with you guys today. It was something I wasn't expecting to do, and I really actually enjoyed meeting somebody else as well who was daily driving a rare car and seeing what condition this was in. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video, but until next time, take care and drive safely.